Hey, what's going on, Trojan family? Welcome to the Salute to Troy podcast here on the LAFB network. We are Los Angeles Sports. This is your USC Trojans show. Joining me, the Madman. Good to see. I feel like I haven't seen you in quite some time, so good to see you. How you doing, brother?
Great to see you, brother. Yeah, no, it's we've been playing the musical chairs on USC LAFB, so we've popcorned it to you and me today. And always a pleasure.
Yeah, that's the beauty of there's four of us. We can popcorn all over and fill the feeds. So, but yes, good to see you. And USC football, college football in general, almost kicks off. We are like 10 or so days away. Cannot wait. High school football starts next week. We were just talking. We'll be at Coach's game next Thursday down in Long Beach. But yeah, it's great to have football back. We're going to talk some depth chart predictions. I try to combine those words there. I think a lot of positions, Madman, are not a lot, but there's a good amount that are set, and then there's a lot in flux, and we'll see some rotations and whatnot. And the beauty is, last year you open it with LSU, you kind of got to have your roster, your starting 22 fairly set. Obviously, you still have time to change things, but you want to have a good idea set. When you start against Missouri State and Georgia Southern, you have some flexibility to kind of test some things out, try some hypotheses and see which combinations work. So I'm assuming we'll definitely see a lot of different variations out there in week 1 and week 2 for that matter. Hopefully, if all things go well. Real quick, I just wanted to ask you before we get to the depth chart, because this news broke today. It's not USC related necessarily, but it is finally Big Ten. We can kind of say thank you. Finally, SEC finally playing 9 conference games. What do you think about that?
Oh, well, finally, welcome. It's in the words of Bruce Willis and Die Hard. Welcome to the party, pal. Finally, the SEC is realizing that they're going to have to play a 9th game because the way they've stacked the non-conference is just completely illegitimate, right? I mean, we've talked about this so much. They open with a couple of easy games, and then they have that magical bye week, around the 2nd, 3rd week of November. To sort of get recharged for the stretch run. And I think they're starting to understand that that's going to have to change, particularly, I think, with the perception. I think the Big Ten has a lot to do with this, because I think when we think about the Big Two and so much conversation around the expansion of the college football playoff to perhaps 24, to perhaps 28, and, there's a model there with the 2018 scenario where the talk is the Big Ten gets 7 automatic qualifiers. The SEC gets 7 automatic qualifiers. Well, if you're going to get 7 automatic qualifiers to be in the college football playoff, you're going to have to really justify that resume. So I think this is sort of a little bit of a silent victory for the Big Ten, Ryan, because I think the Big Ten kind of pushing the SEC for supremacy of college football, particularly winning the last 2 national championships. The SEC will never admit it, but I think it's forcing them to have to modernize and become more competitive and become more attractive from a resume standpoint. It's not just enough just to have the slogan that says it means more. You actually have to have the resume on the field.
Yeah. Well, and anyone that's not like an SEC homer or fan knows that your ranking gets inflated when, it's a 6-2 opponent that you beat. But when 3 or 4 of those 6 wins are against much inferior opponents, like it means a lot. It actually does have meaning there. So I think the 9 games is definitely a small victory for the Big Ten. And, just on Wednesday, I didn't read the full document, but the playoff committee kind of announced some tweaks that they're going to look at and non-conference opponents. And so I think that combined with this SEC decision, hopefully will actually help the USC Notre Dame rivalry survive, because I think it'll actually put some more stock into that game having meaning and not necessarily being a disadvantage for USC, and not have basically it not being a hurtful if they lose. It can actually benefit them. So I think all around these 3 things have all benefited the Big Ten and the USC Notre Dame rivalry.
Totally right. Really well said there. I think if you can get to a place where you're going to institutionalize automatic qualifiers, then it's a different conversation, when it comes to USC Notre Dame. And I think USC is ready to play that game wherever, whenever, when you talk about the automatic qualifiers. And I thought it was also really interesting to that second point about, the media sort of described it as looking at advanced metrics and advanced statistics of and it reminded me of the BCS days, frankly, when it was, for better or for worse. It reminded me just a little bit that initial reaction of the BCS days, when you start having those supercomputers measure strength of schedule, strength of record, and all of those things. But I think the moral of the story here is you got to be able to look at things more holistically than just win-loss and how you sort of feel about the team. And I think that's where we're sort of getting to.
Yeah. Well, and apparently you can just claim national titles now if you're Auburn and whatever that nonsense is.
Hilarious. Yeah. I mean, Tommy Tuberville claiming the 2004 national championship was hilarious. I know that we had a lot of our, all our good friends and brothers in crime in terms of the Twitter super users go crazy. Yeah. I just laughed at how ridiculous that was when you look at the 2004 season, particularly in the fact that in 2003, SC in Leinert's first career start went into Auburn and shut them out 23-0. And anyone who watched that Orange Bowl, which felt like the game of the decade, given who Oklahoma was in the early 2000s and what USC was doing, it was a culmination of a couple of years. And that was 55-19. It was really 55-10. And Oklahoma got the last 9 points in garbage time. Anyone who thinks USC shouldn't have been the national championship unanimously in 2004, what can I say? It just that, but you don't expect anything less from the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, just for different educational requirements in the SEC, I guess.
Totally.
We'll leave it at that.
It means more and it takes less, so
a lot less apparently. Wild. So anyway, that was the big news. I think that I think Big Ten fans should be happy about that. So let's look at this roster, Madman. We are so close. We can taste it. Real football. Don't have to talk projections and what, even though we are talking projections today. Quarterback, we'll just move past quick. Obviously, Jaden Maiava is the starter. Husan Longstreet looks like he has solidified that QB2 role. However, Sam Heward, if needed in a pinch, I think they feel confident in to do things as well. So let's just move over to running back. And we know the big three: Wayman Jordan, Eli Sanders, who Lincoln Riley said today had like the best fall camp of anyone, he thought, and obviously Brian Jackson, who we're both high on, returning after a true freshman season. You also have the true freshman in Harry. I'm all of a sudden drawing a blank on his last. Harry Dalton, who they're very high on. And the dude, I've been at practice, looks like a tank out there, and he could absolutely get some reps. So, just your thoughts on the running back room, and how do you see the split rep going?
Yeah, this is a fascinating one, right? Because when you look at Wayman Jordan and Eli Sanders, they're both built very similarly, right? Like 5'11", 190, 200. There's a lot of burst there. And then Brian Jackson, of course, looks like Lendale 2.0, right down to the visor and the plate and the 6 feet, 235. And so conventional wisdom would say you're going to go a little bit thunder and lightning, in terms of your starting backfield. And, I would say you'd go Brian Jackson, and then you'd have to make a decision between Eli Sanders and Wayman Jordan. And it sounds like, just given how, praiseful Lincoln has been with Eli Sanders, I would think it would be Sanders and Jackson sort of starting in terms of that thunder and lightning role. Obviously, Sanders, 1,000+ yards in New Mexico, 7+ yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. But I think this is going to be one where everyone's going to get a lot of touches here these first 3 weeks to really settle it on the field. And so it could very well be that Lincoln may want to invoke having two guys with equal amounts of burst, and you just have that continuous type of running back the whole game. Or do you want to go thunder and lightning with the Brian Jackson? Or do you want to go, even go 3 deep at running back potentially? Historically, Lincoln's always sort of liked one guy and picked one guy and sort of milked it. It rarely does even go to sort of 2 back. And so that would sort of suggest that he's going to pick one running back, go 80% of the time with that running back, and then your RB2 is about 20% of the carries. And so for those reasons, it feels like Eli Sanders right now, and then Brian Jackson sort of backing him up. But then, you got Wayman there. So I'm a little confused myself, to be honest with you, of how it's going to shake out. The beauty is you have these 3 games, and it's going to settle on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all three are capable, which is a good thing. Obviously, it's a matter of now Lincoln Riley using them correctly and actually running the ball like everyone wants to see and take some of that pressure off Maeva. Just based on, and this is not actual facts or what's going to happen, but based on like media availability, it seems like usually the guys made available are kind of the guys, the leader in the room. And Wayman Jordan's been way more available to media than Brian Jackson. Eli Sanders was available 2 days ago, I want to say. So he's had some. So based on that, it kind of feels like Wayman Jordan may be the leading guy, with Eli Sanders being the change of pace guy, and then Brian Jackson be your more kind of goal line ground and pound guy when you need those 235 pounds to get you a couple extra yards. But it's so hard to say. Like Jordan, when you saw him at Hutchinson Community College, like dude's a true 3-down back. Like like you said, if Lincoln Riley wants his Woody Marks, it's going to just like be the main guy. Like it feels like that's Wayman Jordan, just based on his history at JUCO, based on his skill set, and then sprinkling in Eli Sanders. But again, based on what he said on the others, it's really hard to tell. Either way, I think they're in a really good spot. The last thing I'll say, Madman, is I wouldn't be surprised, because of the versatility of all three guys and the different skill sets, if we see more 2 running back sets. I feel like we haven't seen that hardly at all in this Lincoln Riley era. So seeing kind of that formation with Jaden Mayav in the middle with 2 backs on either side of him, giving him different options in the passing game, but also having more blockers back there, depending on how the offensive line shake out. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that, to try to get them more involved, keep them, lathered in the game and whatnot. And so we'll see. Brian Jackson, luckily, regardless, is only a sophomore. So obviously, you have a lot more to develop him and keep him around as long as he's happy and doesn't want to hit the portal. Whereas a guy like Eli Sanders, this is it for him. Not that you base your strategy on that, but there's a reason he transferred is to get playing time and put on NFL tape. So we'll see though. I think they're in a good spot though, Matt. I mean, before we move on to the next position, love Travis Dye. Love Woody Marks, love some of those guys, but in my opinion, this is the strongest the entire room has been under Riley. Do you agree?
Yes. 1 through 3, no question about it. And that's why it's going to be so fascinating to see how it plays out these first 3 weeks, because I think they're each going to get 8 to 10 carries, hopefully a game over these first 3 weeks. If they don't, there's something wrong there. But and then you sort of settle it on the field. But every time you say something about one, I'm like, gosh, yeah, that's probably the starter. And then you go to the next one, it's like, oh gosh, that could be the starter too. It's almost like an episode of Love Island, Ryan. It's the bombshells keep walking in, you start changing your mind. That's the state of the running back room at USC right now.
Hey, that's a great comp. Running back room is Love Island. And that's like the hottest show in America lately, which is so funny. It's the show's been around for like a decade, and all of a sudden it's huge. Everyone is just all in Love Island. But okay, let's move to the receiving room, Madman. We know Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon are clear 1 and 2. Jacoby Lane, fully healthy, full go in practice the rest of the way per Riley. So that is great to hear. After that, it gets really interesting. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of talent. I think before I just toss it to you and ask your thoughts on who's kind of wide receiver 3, 4, 5, I think what's good about this room right now compared to last year is there's a lot of depth, a lot of talent, a lot of skill, but there is kind of a clear pecking order. Whereas last year you had 4 guys all like wanting to be wide receiver 1, as they should be, but there was no clear, I mean, we talked about it a bunch, like who is the guy or the 2 guys. Whereas this year we know we got the 2 alphas, and then the rest kind of fall in line and fill in where their skill sets fit. But with that being said, how do you kind of see 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever shaking out?
It's a ton of talent back there. I mean, and they're young and they're explosive. I mean, when you talk about, the freshmen, Ryan, I mean, this is, again, I mean, we talked about running back, but from a freshman pipeline standpoint, this might be the deepest under Lincoln Riley at the wide receiver position. I mean, you got Tanook Hines, you got Corey Sims, you got Xavier Jordan, all of whom have shown tremendous flashes at various points in fall and spring camp. I don't know if it's more my disposition towards kind of veterans and guys that have played and allowing freshmen to sort of work their way in, because I think all of those freshmen are going to have opportunities in some of these lesser games, and I think going to make some splashes, as you normally would expect over the course of the year. But there's a guy that's, I think, flying under the radar as a veteran that I think could really step in and be very complimentary here, and that's Jay Fair. I mean, you saw it last year, Michigan game, some other games. And I think considering what perhaps, Maeva's style of taking some deep shots, as well as, I think that Maeva is going to kind of play a lot of checkdowns and then take a lot of deep shots. I think it's really that intermediate game that's going to need to kind of step up to the next level. And obviously you got Lemon and Lane. But to me, you need a little bit more of a defined role with wide receiver 3. And I know he's flying under the radar and everyone's sort of enamored with the freshman, as they should be. But I don't know. For me, I just kind of like Jay Fair emerging. And it may not happen right away. It may happen game 4, 5, 6. But I could see Jay Fair really slot into that wide receiver 3.
Yeah, Jay Fair is going to have a role for sure. I think when you look at the speed and what he can bring, and he could even be that similar to what they kind of, not to the same level, but what they wanted with Zachariah Branch. He can kind of fill that out a little bit because of his size and speed. So I think Jay Fair will absolutely have a role. For me, like I think the kind of the pecking order, and I don't know exactly 3, 4, 5. I just think this group of 3 guys will be the next 3 after Lemon and Lane. And that's, I think, Prince Strawn, I think, has had a strong camp, the transfer from Boise State. I think for him, it's just like the size that is different from the rest of the room. I mean, he is a tall dude. I mean, looks a lot like Jacoby Lane in a way. I think he has a little bit different skill set than Jacoby Lane. So I think he brings that added element, especially in the red zone. I think he'll be utilized a lot. I think DJ Jordan, or Xavier Jordan, is a guy now as a sophomore, has gotten some talk at practice, like kind of a guy that his name kind of sneaks around always that comes up, and a guy that they've seen improved a lot. So I don't think he'll be like super involved in week 1 and 2, or maybe will just because of the competition, but I think we'll see him continue to grow and blossom. And then Zacharias Williams, who they got as the transfer from Utah. I mean, here's a dude. He was going to arguably going to be the best wide receiver in the Big 12, certainly the best wide receiver on Utah. Hits the portal, comes back home to LA and joins USC. And now he's a guy that they're hoping to kind of take over that punt return role, potentially, if he can beat out or take that off of Lemon's plate. But I certainly think they're going to utilize him a lot in this offense. Like, he might actually, Madman, be the wide receiver 3 heading into week 1 within Strawn, Fair, and DJ Jordan. And then, like you mentioned, the freshman, I think Corey Sims is definitely going to be involved. They love him a lot. Tanuke Hines has looked good. But I totally agree with you. It'll be we've seen, especially in the Lincoln Riley area, like these guys get worked in slowly. I mean, Jacoby Lane didn't play till the bowl game his freshman year. So we'll definitely see the freshmen get worked in slowly. But and then Jaden Richardson, I know I'm just naming the whole room here, but another guy that they've gotten excited about, and I think has built a good rapport with with Maeva, and he had media availability on Tuesday, which, again, don't put tons of stock in that, but it does tell you a little something when you're not just going to put a wide receiver 8 to the media. So, he did have media availability, kind of showing where they see him in the room. So long way.
Yeah. Ryan, it's going to be interesting with Williams. I mean, it's a great point. I didn't mention him initially just because I wonder how Riley is going to approach the line between special teams and wide receiver. And I think, how much of a specialization is he going to play? How much is it, I just want my best guys to get touches? Is there something that maybe he has learned or wants to adjust from the way he utilized Zach Branch last year, of like, maybe there's, an overutilization perhaps, or do I want guys to be more in specialist roles? So I think those are all going to be questions, these first couple of weeks to sort of work your way out. I completely agree with you, though. Zacharias Williams is a stud talent, but sometimes also that at wide receiver 3, sometimes you need to just do one thing really well, as opposed to be this decorated overall athlete. When you've got the pecking order of Lemon and Lane, and you're a really great athlete, but you're not necessarily quite as good as those 2 guys, sometimes you sort of get lost in the shuffle. And sometimes it's those wide receiver 3s are either, your go route specialists, or just your sort of slot guys, or just guys that work a certain matchup or a certain type of the field. So it's not necessarily who the 3 best wide receivers are. It's really, or who the 3rd best wide receiver is, I should say, but who's going to fit best into that 3rd role. So I think that's what's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out. And so much of it is going to come down to also Maeva's evolution. Where does he need to be comfortable? Because a wide receiver 3 in many ways is sort of your it's your third or fourth progression, and where's Maeva's head going to be at progression 3 or 4? Like, is he going to stay in the pocket? Is he going to sort of scramble more? Is he just going to automatically think downfield? Is he going to automatically think underneath? So much of that is going to be like, what are Maeva's characteristics going to be in 2025 when you're at option 3 or 4? And that's why it's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I could be putting my foot in my mouth, but I truly believe we will see some 2 running back sets. I do think we'll see more 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, which just means there's not going to be like last year with 5 receivers out wide. So that wide receiver 3 will have a true role, unlike last year where it's like, hey, here's 5 guys, go run in the yard and just find who's open. They'll be more like, hey, this is as you said, this is the third option, but this is you're trying to pull the safety down so this guy gets open, whatever it may be. Who does that best? So it'll be fun to see. But I'm really pumped, Madman, to see Williams. I just think he has that true wide receiver 1 ability. It won't obviously be this year. He's only a sophomore, so this guy could be the wide receiver 1 of the future. And depending how it goes this year with his run. All right, tight end. I think obviously very clear, Lake McCree is the starter. I think Walker Lyons has shown he is the starter in waiting and he's going to get lots of reps. But when you look at, Joey Olsen, when you look at Carson Tabarachi, when you look at Walter Matthews, really interesting to see what they do and how they kind of rotate those guys in potentially after Lake and Walker. How do you see the tight end room shaking out?
Yeah, Ryan, it's going to be really interesting. I think, what I'm sort of looking out for is Lake McCree's durability this year, and obviously he's, full clean bill of health, made a full recovery, but, he's taken some pounding over the years. And, that Michigan game obviously was the last game of his season last year. And he's had some injury histories in years past as well. So to me, it's going to also be about Lake McCree's durability. I think he's clearly tight end number 1. He's earned that right, even both on the field as well as off the field. But Lincoln got a lot of heat on some of those, screen crossers, we'll call them, with sort of set up Lake McCree, unfortunately, on that blind side. I think Miller Moss used Lake McCree very effectively early in the season last year, particularly in that LSU game, particularly, in the Michigan game before he got hurt. So I think how Lincoln uses the tight end more down the seam as opposed to, sort of sideline underneath stuff, I think is going to play a big role. Because I think if you can use Lake McCree more in seam situations, I think McCree's going to have a big year, high usage rate, and he's going to be that security blanket that Maeva needs. If he starts sort of deviating a little bit from the middle of the field, does McCree's injury, kind of probability go up? And then do you see Walker Lyons and some of the other guys come in? Walker Lyons has got a ton of athleticism. I just love Walker Lyons' athleticism and what he can bring from an upside perspective. So I think there's going to be a world where Walker Lyons makes you kind of go, at some points this season with some big plays. But to me, this is about how Lake McCree is going to be used. And I think a successful year is going to be that he'll be used down the middle of the field more.
Yeah. Yeah. And you said it, his durability, and he's certainly, I think, looks great and healthy and is ready for a good season and should be utilized. So, and I just know they're so excited about Walker Lyons. Man, this is like his first true off season since like his sophomore year in high school. You figure he got hurt his senior year, then he goes on his mission and he's gone. And then last year didn't have the full off season, getting back to just body weight and football shape. So this was his first true offseason with the program, the entire offseason with the guys, with the trainers, with the staff. And so being able to put it all together now going into this year, I think there's a ton of excitement. And you mentioned it, the athleticism, the catch radius and all that. So he's going to certainly be heavily involved and we'll just see if it's in the 12 personnel usage or more just swapping out for Lake in certain situations. So to me, for now, those are your 2 guys. I mean, Walter Matthews, Lincoln Riley confirmed today he's not moving anywhere. He's staying tight end, but obviously we've seen him doing some reps with the O-line. That's more for blocking, training, and stuff like that. We might see him in some packages. It doesn't seem like he's going to be heavily involved in the offense. Joey Olsen's been dealing with, I don't know what injury, but it seems like he's been held out a little bit of camp. So he's got to get caught up to speed. So to me, it really just feels like this is a 2-man show for tight end right now. I don't know if you see it any differently, but that's kind of
no. I think it's a pretty clear pecking order here, and Lions, to me, in a lot of ways, Ryan, his athleticism is so high. It's sort of what you thought at the beginning Deuce Robinson might be, like it from a sort of a different vantage point of really, really big wide receiver who maybe, what type of a hybrid role could he potentially play? Lions has that level of athleticism, in my opinion. And so I think seeing his evolution is going to be a lot of fun. And, Lincoln's done some magical things with the tight end position, particularly at Oklahoma. And so, does that unlock an element of creativity in his playbook that we just have not seen yet at USC? Lions has the ability to do that.
100%. And he's not going anywhere. He's locked in, but this is a really good kind of audition, if you will, how they use Walker Lyons moving forward. Nothing against Lake McCree, but is going to be helpful for Mark Bowman to stay fully committed in 26, totally. Saying like, all right, this is how the USC is going to use the tight end position and use me in that hybrid role that you use. So it's not going to be up to Walker Lyons, but it'll be up to the creativity of how he looks in the offense. So, all right, Madman, let's get to this is the one everyone wants to talk about. We waited until the middle of the show or a little past, and this is one that everyone has questions about, the offensive line. Obviously, we know DJ Wingfield now is out, as sad as that is, and whatever with the injunction and all that situation. He will not be a USC Trojan this year. Team is, I feel like, expected that. Obviously, he hasn't been there all fall camp, so they've been trying different combinations. I believe, as I kind of alluded to, last year you play LSU, you kind of need your 22 to look somewhat crystallized. This year you get 2 weeks to really play with it and test things around. So I think we'll see a lot of different combinations these first 2 weeks. I'm just going to put you on the spot right off the bat. Who's your starting five on the offensive line?
Yeah, Ryan. I think for me, the easy one to start with is Elijah Page, left tackle.
That one's a lock. We can say
that's a lock.
Yeah. The one lock.
The one lock. It gets interesting after that, but I think left guard to me is Benuelos. I think at center is John Ray Reed. I think right guard is Alani Noah. And then I think at right tackle is Tobias Raymond. I think that's my five. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity, in particular in these first 3 weeks. I mean, that's sort of a theme here. Killian O'Connor, others coming in. But to me, I think those are my five. I think it's a combination of Jean-Ray Reed kind of being a specialist at center, combined with, Page being, with sort of a decorated upside. You love the athleticism of a Tobias Raymond on that right side, and your tackles really need to be kind of horizontally quick and agile. And I think Tobias Raymond answers the mail there. I love Alani Noah's experience. I mean, 12 or 13 starts last year. So you're bringing in some continuity. And then Benuelos' motor has just been super high. And, a guy who really there's sort of an element of desperation to his game this year of really wanting to make it to that next jump. And I think, his hand techniques and just his body, his low center of gravity. To me, that's my five going in to start the season. But, this is why you've recruited the way you've recruited with the offensive line the last couple of years. This is why, you've got a nice schedule here to play with. And again, it's going to also kind of go hand in hand a little bit with who your running backs are going to be, because the gelling between the line and the backs, I think, is going to play a big role as well. So they're all sort of interrelated, but those are my five.
Yeah, I definitely have that. Like, I'll give like 3 different depth charts and then I'll finalize one of what I'm going to go with, gun to my head. But that's one of them. I think that's the best fits in terms of what guys were brought here to do. I think that one makes the most kind of sense on paper. The biggest thing with Micah Benuelos is his strength fully where it was before he got injured. Obviously, coming back from injury, is he at 100% strength? Not that he's at 100% health, but getting that full body weight, that strength back. And that's what they'll probably test out during these first 2 weeks when you don't have Big Ten play yet. The really interesting one, Jamal, is the center position, because when Jean-Ray Reed transferred here, it felt like, okay, done. Center's done. That's the lock. He's a very good center. He's the first like true center Lincoln Riley has had since being here. And it's not a lock. I mean, there's a real competition between him and Killian O'Connor, and the staff loves Killian O'Connor. Jean-Ray Reed loves Killian O'Connor. The offensive line because Killian, I mean, he has that true leadership as does John Ray Reed. I mean, his nickname is the Admiral. So this is the interesting one, and this is the one I'm going to throw at you before I get to my other pairings. I've said this before, like, if those two guys, the competition's so great, like, why can't one of them play guard potentially?
Right.
Yesterday or Tuesday was the first time I'd heard Lincoln Riley say John Ray Reed has position flex. I'd never heard him say that. Everyone's talked about he is a true center. That's what he is. That's always played. But it's the first time, and maybe I'm reading into it too much, but he kind of, everyone else glossed over it, but he said John Ray Reed has position flex. There could be a world where John Ray Reed slides that left guard.
Yep.
And you go Page, John Ray Reed, Killian O'Connor, Alani Noah, Tobias Raymond. So that's, I think, one interesting pairing that I don't know if we'll see it or not. And then the other just different one from yours is moving Tobias Raymond to left guard. I think he's, in my opinion, best at tackle, but I know they've played him all over. We talked to him on Tuesday. He talked about playing both and feeling comfortable at both. And so you move him to left guard, whether it's Reed or Killian O'Connor at center, Alani Noah at right guard, and then the young Justin Tanow at right tackle, who they're very high on and has had a very big fall camp as well. So it's going to be interesting. There's been a lot of talk. Kalen Miller, the walk-on, has really challenged Alani Noah. I do think Noah does win that job. So I don't know what I really want to go with as the true starting five. I mean, I'll just ask this to you before we move on. Concern, question, whatever word you want to use, worried, like, what's your just state of the offensive line?
I like the depth of the offensive line. I love the fact that it's competitive and they're pushing each other, but I worry a little bit, Ryan, about top end talent after Page, and is there going to be a world where these guys, do you have multiple guys that are capable of being all Big Ten performers? Because I think that's sort of the step that you need to be able to take for this year to be the year that is a really big step in the right direction here. And so for me, love the depth, love the competitiveness. I love that these guys are pushing each other, but I am a little worried about just top end talent, and is this offensive line going to really be able to move the line of scrimmage in some of these bigger games, against the Oregon defensive lines, against the Notre Dame defensive lines, against the Illinois defensive lines, even against the Nebraska defensive lines. And so those are the games to me that I wonder a little bit. And again, hoping that this sort of glorified preseason, which is the month of September, is able to adjust. I love the point that you made. I worry a little bit. They're high on Tanow, and I know why, and he's young, but I worry a little bit to throw sort of a first-year starter at a tackle position. The tackle is just such a sensitive position, particularly when it's sort of a level jump from high school to college, and that lateral quickness just comes at you really, really fast. And I just really like Tobias Raymond's athleticism. I just think his athleticism is going to be hard to replace. And so I wouldn't necessarily be in favor of moving him to the guard spot, even if you're sort of high on Tanow. I agree with you. I think the one variation that could very well happen is this John Ray Reed, Killian O'Connor dynamic. And I think, to your point, it's going to come down to how much of an upside do you believe Banuelos is going to have this year? And if you feel like, John Ray Reed can slide to that left guard, and then you got Killian O'Connor at center, is that going to sort of set you up for success the most? And I think that's going to be interesting. I would be curious to see, and I don't know the history offhand, and perhaps you do, but when centers have transitioned to other roles on the offensive line, how effective they've been, particularly in college, particularly in a Lincoln Riley system over the last couple of years. I don't know that offhand. But it would be interesting to see, because center feels like the one that's just different from the others. When you talk about just even position on the field and you're sort of one-of-one there, you're calling out the plays, you're the only one that has the ball in your hand every play. It's just sort of such a different position. So to be able to slide even outside of the center position, to me, is much more nuanced than sort of meets the eye there. But I agree with you. They love O'Connor so much, and it's why I mentioned him in my opening, and that's the variation to me. If anything gets disrupted, it'll be that one.
Yeah, it's funny because typically when positions move, they move to center, right? Like
Right,
tackle
right.
moves inside to guard, and then guard moves to center.
This is working its way out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be a very different thought. The other kind of, I guess, benefit you could see is you have two generals, if you will, both together on the offensive line. I don't know if you heard this, but Brett Kolejay, who committed to USC, not too long ago, goes to IMG. He's a guard, and he called the plays on the offensive line, not the center. He was the one calling out the checks and all this from the guard position. So it can be done. And if you have two guys that have that ability to, read a defense, is that a benefit, or is that clashing too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing? So the whole thing is interesting. I think in a perfect world, I agree with you. Tobias Raymond's on those are your bookends, Page and Raymond, with, and then with either Reed or Bonuelos at left guard and Alani Noah obviously at right guard. So we'll see. Just to put a bow on it, like I'm a little uneasy, but I'm also more, I think, confident than others in the offensive line. I think maybe I just have a lot of stock in Zach Hanson as a coach and a lot of these young guys. The thing I've said before is, and you kind of alluded to it, like I love the talent. I love the depth. What I don't love is the inexperience. And that's what we're going to see. Like, is that inexperience going to bite them? Or is it enough of a preseason, like you said, where they can get that experience as they head into Big Ten play? So we're going to see all those variations. I think fans should know that we're going to see these variations in the first week. And then we'll see what really sticks kind of by the Michigan game, if you will. So I jump over to defense?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I think this will be quicker outside of the secondary. Defensive line. Let's just stay in the trenches. Loaded room.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I try not to be like overly biased, but I think this is one of the better rooms in the Big Ten. When you just look at the depth and the top end talent, the fact that Keyshawn Silver and Ja Jarrett, we talked about it last time me and you were on together, transferred, and yet they're not technically even like the starters. Like they're actually backups behind some of the other guys. So the depth is certainly the best we've seen. You don't got to list everyone because I'm sure I'll end up doing that. So who do you see as kind of your, starting with maybe 1A, 1B right behind them?
Yeah. No, Ryan, I think it's going to be interesting. My edges to sort of start. I really like Cam Fountain and I like Lucas, as my two edges. But then, of course, you've got a lot behind there, and where Jakeem Stewart sort of falls into all this as a true freshman. He's sort of the ultimate wild card there. I like them sort of at the edge. I think in terms of interior, Devin Tompkins, is someone that, has sort of almost like flown under the radar in sort of fall camp and, in spring, I should say, and now going into fall, he's rightfully so being talked about given sort of his stature. I think a big year is expected there. And then I think the other interior line spot is also very interesting. I think there's also sort of a lot of flexibility. Yeah, I mean, you got Ja Jarrett, you got Keyshawn Silver. What do you do with Shelby? And then you got obviously Jahid Abasari is there. And so Gus Cordova. And so there's a lot of mixing and matching that you can do there. For me, again, I'm going to go sort of what I see, not necessarily, who's going to start the season, but to me, I'm thinking of this as who's ultimately going to converge to the first four. For me, it's going to be Fountain and Lucas on the edges, and then Tompkins and Jarrett. To me, I think is the four that you're going to ultimately converge to. But I think it's going to be a really fluid situation.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of guys are going to play. We're going to see a lot of guys. I totally agree with you on the edges there. Braylon Shelby will be obviously heavily involved as well. But I do agree. I think if people care about the starters on the depth chart, it's going to probably say Anthony Lucas or Braylon Shelby is how they're going to do it. So you have like three of your starters with Cam Fountain. Totally agree on Devin Tompkins. I personally would maybe, if again, all these guys are going to play, if we put a as starter, I might put Jahid Abasari. Actually, I think he's made a big leap. Obviously the size we've seen him put on and the way the coaches have talked. So I would maybe put him in there as the starter, quote unquote, but obviously Keyshawn Silver, Ja Jarrett are going to play. Kobe Pepe, we haven't mentioned, like that guy that's still there. That's a big beefy body that's going to be there on run stopping. He probably won't be in there on third and longs, but certainly first downs situations. Jakeem Stewart is certainly going to get some run. So, but yeah, if we're sticking kind of with the starters, I think those would be totally agree with you. I'll just switch out Jahid Abasari. Give me one guy on the D-line, edge or interior, that is not the Jakeem Stewart. Like, give me a guy that's like an under the radar that you think could have a bigger impact in season than maybe people think.
Yeah, I think Ryan, I really like Cordova. I think Gus Cordova, just in terms of, I think what he brings to the table. I think that there's a lot of underrated strength there. I think there's an underrated burst there. I think we don't think of him in the same, and wrongfully so. I think he's just not being talked about in the same sort of athletic realm as some of these other guys. I could see a world where Gus Cordova ultimately makes a massive impact for this team in some critical games, and particularly down the stretch in the second half of the season. So Cordova is a guy for me that is maybe flying a little bit more under the radar, that I think is going to make a big impact.
I can't wait to watch him. He was, when we were talking about the recruiting class, I think both you and I said this is like our underrated guy. Should have probably been a 4-star. And what he brings, I mean, 6'5", like 270.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to watch him. The only thing going against him is he didn't come till the fall, finished high school, so didn't enroll early. So a little bit playing catch up there. But when he gets caught fully up to speed, I think we'll certainly see him out there. For me, I'll stick with edge. Madman, I'm going to go Jaden Ramos. I mean, this is a guy, the late commit at the February commitment date, him and AJ Tuateli, and 3-star under the radar out of like small town Texas. All he did was have 18 sacks his senior year. And there's been a lot of hype about him around camp. His big thing for me is adding a little bit more weight. When you look at edge, same height as Cordova. I think they're both 6'4", 6'5". As I mentioned, Cordova is like 270. Ramos, I believe, is like 225. 220. So certainly a little bit of a tweener there for size. Yeah. So, but he certainly has the pass rush move, certainly has the speed and the bend around the edge to get through a tackle. So for him, it'll just be putting on a little bit more weight, which obviously is going to take some time to do. And then I'll just throw another name, and I'm not going to talk long, but I think Carlin Jones has a year this year. He was a freshman that we didn't see last year at all.
Right.
Was dealing, I think, with a wrist injury or something as well. So that's a big body we could see in rotation there. All right, D-line. Let's move to linebacker. This is a room, Madman, that was probably entering spring the biggest concern among the fan base when you look at the depth and who's there. But I think it's one of the room that, kudos to Rob Ryan. I think it's one of the most exciting rooms actually on this team now when you've seen how it's transpired. But who do you see as your starters and maybe one or two contributors outside of those two starters?
Yeah, right. I mean, I think for me, the starters are pretty clear cut here. I mean, with Gentry and Stevens, those are the two guys. I mean, Gentry to me is one of the great wild cards in all of college football, frankly, because if Gentry sort of reaches the best version of Gentry, you're talking about a disruptor on the defensive side of the ball, because guys are just not built like him. I sort of make the analogy, he's sort of like Rafa Nadal in tennis. It's just the body doesn't actually go with the position, and that's what makes him very special. And, just the number one question with Gentry, as we've talked about for months now, is, can he stay healthy? That durability, the body is the blessing and the curse with Gentry. And then I think with Stevens, you just saw a versatility last year as a freshman, and I expect him to make a huge jump. I mean, whether, he can do it all. You can slide him in the box, and he's a thumping run stopper. He had interceptions last year. You can slide him back into coverage. You can do a lot of disguises with him. I think he's just really special there. And then I think, beyond that, it gets sort of interesting. You've got Anthony Beavers. You've got Jaden Walker. You've got Matai. You got some young guys there that are going to threaten. I've got my eye on kind of those three, for different reasons, from a dynamism perspective and what they bring to the table. But for me, it's much like the tight end, it's kind of a clear 1-2 here. Obviously, in tight end, you only get one position here. Obviously, you got the two, but Gentry and Stevens for me is pretty clear cut.
Yeah, 100%. I don't need to add too much more. I think those are your very, very clear 1 and 2, and they're actually going to be two of the better linebackers in the Big Ten. I think the key here, Jamal, is like who is linebacker 3, because the biggest key with Gentry is keeping him healthy, which means you're going to want to have certain situations, rotate him out just, for precaution, you don't want to play precautionary, but certain situations, get another guy in there. And so who is that true linebacker 3 that can come in certain situations. And you mentioned Beavers. I think he certainly has the leadership qualities that this defense likes, and the versatility, obviously being a former safety. I think Tamir Robinson, the transfer from Penn State, has actually got a lot of love from this coaching staff, has picked up the system a lot quicker, I think, than many anticipated. So he's one to watch. And then you mentioned Jaden Walker. I'll just throw out Elijah Newby, who linebacker, they moved to DN, they moved back to linebacker, and he's done really, really well. Rob Ryan, I think, loves Newby and his versatility. So, but yeah, we'll see. I think we'll see all those guys play. How much is to say, but Stevens, Gentry, and then probably Beavers and Robinson are kind of the rotational guys after that, at the start at least. But it's a much stronger room, Madman, than many of us thought it'd be back in the spring, which is great. And, again, hats off to kind of some of the under the radar recruiting guys, the portal, but then also Rob Wright and how he's gotten those guys ready to rock and roll. So, all right, the secondary. I think what's so fun about this secondary is the depth. Like, I've talked a bunch that I think 9 guys are going to play on Saturdays.
Yeah.
And they're going to rotate to 9 guys. That's just how deep it is. Dan Lynn and Doug Belk love keeping guys fresh and the versatility outside of, I don't think you're going to take Kamari Ramsey off the field very often, but outside of him, I think we'll see a lot of guys rotating in and out. So that being said, though, give me your starting 5. And it can be free safety, it can be whatever, because guys are going to move all over. So give me your starting 5.
Guys are going to move all over. So this is one of those where you can't necessarily get wrong, but you also can't necessarily get right, Yep. So, but I think sort of from a safety position, Rye, obviously you got Ramsey, and I think you got Bishop Fitzgerald.
Yep.
I think you're feeling good there. I think at corner, I really like Chasen Johnson, and, I think DeCarlos Nicholson brings a veteran experience. So I like those 2. And then, between, and I think Prophet Brown would have been that 5th guy before he got hurt, just from a veteran standpoint, to sort of start things off, to sort of play in that sort of nickel role. But now, you sort of have to sort of assess things differently post-injury. To me, a little bit of a toss-up between DJ Harvey and Marcellus Williams. I like DJ Harvey, but it's by like a nose. So I think I'm going to go, Harvey, Chasen Johnson, DeCarlos Nicholson, Bishop Fitzgerald, Kamari Ramsey. But like my conviction level is that of a Las Vegas gambler, on, on a pick'em game, so.
Yeah, I know, I'm with you. And, those 5 will play, and I think 4 to even 5 more will get reps as well.
Yeah.
I agree with you totally on the back end. Those to me are your kind of clear 2 starting safeties. Obviously, I think Christian Pierce will get some run back there. Kennedy Urlacher has had a great camp from Notre Dame, so they're excited about him. Corners, I think DeCarlos Nicholson is a lock. I think he's grown a lot in just the size. I mean, not a lot of corners have the size and length that he has. Chasen Johnson, he's a little banged up right now, unfortunately, but if he comes back healthy, I agree with you. I think he is your other lock. And then that third kind of nickel spot is where it gets really interesting. The name not a lot of people are talking about is Braylon Conley. I think Braylon Conley is actually going to be heavily involved. And that's nothing against DJ Harvey, but I think a lot of fans think that the PFF grades from him transferring over from San Jose State, the experience, that he was just the shoe-in starter. That's not to say he is not going to be really good and not play a lot of reps. Totally. I just think that there's other guys that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on, if you will. And I think Braylon Conley is one of those guys. Now the question is, can he play slot or is he more outside? I think he's more outside.
Yeah.
And so is it one of those like Chasen Johnson or Braylon Conley on the outside, DeCarlos Nicholson or DJ Harvey on the outside, or Marcellus Williams, or who plays in that slot role that would have been Prophet Brown. So it's going to be interesting. The name the name Madman that I'll throw at you that I want to get your thoughts on is because he's been just raved about. He's gotten reps with the ones, and it's always a little leery when it's a true freshman, but Alex Graham, originally committed to Colorado, flips last minute out of Detroit, Michigan. I mean, the dude has just been getting rave reviews. I think Dan Lynn talked yesterday about the mentals, about him just like fully understanding the defense, everyone's role within the defense. So now he can just go out and play, which you do not see from true freshmen. So there is a real world where a true freshman ends up being your starting slot in Alex Graham. What's your thoughts on him?
No, I mean, he's a star, Ryan. I mean, he's going to be one hopefully for a number of years for USC. I think when you're in the secondary as a freshman, you have to go and win the job. No one can sort of lose it. And I think that's sort of with all the guys we talked about, it's sort of, hey, is someone going to fall back? Someone's going to jump in. There's an element of someone losing a job, someone winning a job. With Alex Graham, he's going to have to go and take it. But I will say one thing, if anyone can take it, he can. And I think he's going to get I think he's probably going to get more reps than a lot of the other guys in these first two games, particularly, I think just with the nature of, I think the game's getting out of hand in the third and fourth quarter. And I think if he can make some plays, it's going to be very, very interesting. He's fearless. That's the other thing. When you talk about sort of the mental acuity that the coaching staff is talking about, it's about picking up the playbook. It's about a level of maturity that he's got. He carries himself as a kid who's a lot older, but he's also fearless. And that's the one trait you got to have in the secondary, that fearlessness and that lack of memory. And Graham coupled that with incredible, burst and speed. Graham, to me, is he's special.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing in with this is like which guys are viewed as outside corners and which are viewed as inside slot nickel corners, because you want your just best five out there and you kind of make it work, but it is a different position. You're covering a different style of receiver. Sometimes you end up getting matched with like a tight end, depending how the personnel grouping goes. So we'll see once the season starts is like, okay, do they view a Marcellus Williams as a true outside guy? Is Braylon Conley a true outside guy? Is Chasen Johnson a true outside guy? Or do we see them kind of move within the confines of the different kind of slot and outside? And then you have that versatility. But if you have like 4 or 5 guys that are only outside guys, then that opens the door for a true freshman to be that slot guy, because no one else can really play it. So we got to need him to step up if these are all just competing for the outside. So that'll be the last thing I'll say on that. That'll be interesting.
No, I mean, there's 37 interesting things, right? With the secondary alone, but certainly with this roster. But yeah, I mean, that's the other element of this whole thing, sort of across the board. We touched upon it a little bit with the wide receivers, but it comes down to skill set and need sometimes. It's not always going to be the most talented 3 or the most talented 5. It's going to be, can you do something, or do you have enough versatility to be able to slide into a type of role that this team maybe is a little thinner on versus where they're a little bit deeper on? And I think the secondary is the perfect example of this. I will say also, Ryan, that really, really, I think grateful Lincoln Riley should feel about the schedule playing out the way it has this year. Can you imagine with this many, I don't want to say questions, but this level of competition and closeness that you sort of have across the board, if you had to go into LSU week 1 and you had to be able to make those decisions, it's really hard then to use those next 2 games before a conference to be able to make all these decisions. Oftentimes after an LSU game, that next game is just sort of a rest and recovery game. Guys are, getting used to the grind and the battle, particularly at that level with that level of competition. So that second game, you almost burn it as sort of a recovery recharge type of game. And then you're just down to a third game to be able to make assessments and make decisions. And sometimes that's just not enough. Here, you're in a position, 2 non-Power 4 teams, 1 win Purdue team, and then you're sort of easing it in. I mean, I don't know if Michigan State's truly a world beater here. That's going to be probably a 4 or 5 win team this year in the Big Ten before Michigan and Illinois. So you really got those 4 games, and it starts ramping up a little bit in competition in a perfect way. So the schedule just sets up so nicely to be able to have these conversations and these types of decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you look at the depth, the other, I always say last thing, but this really will be my last point. We saw the chess mass, which in the game last year, we saw USC get burned a few times with the whole defensive substitutions, right? Like the offense would make a late sub, and the defense would roll out someone slow. But I'm curious to see this year how USC will utilize this, especially with how much depth they have to be able to see what personnel grouping the opponent has.
That's right. Okay, that's a great point.
We like this corner better matched up with this guy, not because necessarily Johnson's better than DJ Harvey, but he actually matches up better than this guy. So
exactly.
How are they going to do that chess match? Because they have 9 guys they can all play and start, but depending on who the personnel grouping is, who's out there. So that's going to be fun to watch too.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. It's all going to be fun to watch, right? And
back,
hard
baby.
to believe we're single-digit days away from the kickoff of the 25 season. Finally, it feels like, Rye, you've been talking about recruiting for 10 months. We get to talk ball here. It's going to be great.
I have been. So yeah. Oh man, it is fantastic. So well, thank you, Madman. It was great to hang out and talk ball with you. It's been too long. Thank you everyone for hanging out with us. We'll be back. Plenty more USC content every day here on the LAFB Network. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and check out LAFBnetwork.com. For the Madman, I'm Ryan Dyer. This is Salute to Troy. We'll be back with more USC football very soon.